In 1995, Troy University launched the Helen Keller Lecture Series. The vision of Troy Chancellor Dr. Jack Hawkins Jr. and First Lady Mrs. Janice Hawkins, the lecture series was initiated to call attention to and raise awareness of the challenges of those with physical limitations, particularly those affecting sensory ability. The lecture has also provided the opportunity to highlight those who have devoted their careers to meeting the needs of the sensory impaired and to celebrate the collaborative efforts and partnerships of Troy University and the agencies and individuals who serve these special individuals. Through the years, we've been inspired by speakers such as Heather Whitestone, the first deaf Miss America, the late Senator Howell Heflin, a longtime friend of the Keller family and an advocate for those facing physical limitations, Eric Weinmeier, who in 2001 became the first blind person to reach the summit of Mount Everest and has since completed the 7 summits, the highest points on every continent. The late actress Patty Duke, who portrayed Helen Keller in the 1962 film The Miracle Worker, and later in the 1979 television adaptation of the movie, played the role of Anne Sullivan, Helen Keller's teacher. Stage and screen actor Anthony Natali, known from appearances in movies such as Jerry Maguire, Mr. Holland's Opus, and Children of a Lesser God. Coach Harold Jones in Radio, whose story gained attention as the result of the 2003 movie Radio, starring Cuba Gooding Jr. and Ed Harris. Renowned eye surgeon Dr. Robert Morris and cornea transplant recipient Cameron Stovall, and acclaimed jazz pianist and Steinway artist Marcus Roberts, who lost his sight at the age of 5 due to cataracts and glaucoma, among others. In 2016, Troy University's Department of Theater and Dance shed an artistic light on the life of Helen Keller through the performance of Helen Unveiled, a contemporary ballet by world-renowned Italian dancer and choreographer Adria Ferrali. Helen Keller once said, "Character cannot be developed in ease and quiet. Only through experience of trial and suffering can the soul be strengthened, vision cleared, ambition inspired, and success achieved." As we gather today for our 25th lecture, it is our hope that the words you hear and the legacy of Helen Keller will strengthen your soul and equip you with the vision, inspiration, and ambition necessary to achieve success.
Well, good morning once again, and welcome to the 25th Helen Keller Lecture here at Troy University. I'm Kerry Palmer, the Dean of the College of Education here at Troy, and it is my honor to bring you greetings and to introduce our Chancellor. As you saw, the Helen Keller Lecture Series was established by Chancellor and Mrs. Jack Hawkins Jr. to honor the life and legacy of Alabama native Helen Keller, who overcame tremendous obstacles to emerge as a champion for those who must navigate life with sensory challenges. Today, we continue this great tradition of providing hope and inspiration to those gathered here as we welcome Luke Murphy to Troy for our 25th lecture. It is our hope that today's message lifts you up and provides you with a desire to serve and make a difference, despite your present circumstances. We are also hosting today our Future Teachers Summit in the College of Education, and I'm delighted to welcome participants in this summit to our lecture today. We have close to 100 high school students in attendance from as far north as Shelby County and all the way down to Baldwin County and points between. Welcome to Troy, and thank you for your interest in educating the youth of tomorrow. I'm also pleased to recognize students from the Alabama Institute of Deaf and Blind, and I'm told that they have been delayed due to some bus trouble, but they may be coming in shortly if they have not already done so. These students are coming to us from Talladega today and will spend the day on campus, and we certainly welcome them and their teachers to Troy. Here at Troy, we're blessed with outstanding leadership, and I'm pleased that so many of our senior administrators are in attendance this morning. I would ask that these individuals please stand when I call your name and that the audience hold all applause until everyone is introduced. Dr. Lance Tatum is our Senior Vice Chancellor for Academic Affairs. Dr. Jim Bookout, Senior Vice Chancellor for Financial Affairs and Online Education. Mr. Sohel Agbatwala, Senior Vice Chancellor for Student Services and Administration. Dr. John Schmidt is the Interim Senior Vice Chancellor for Advancement and Economic Development. Mr. Brent Jones is our Director of Athletics. Dr. Judson Edwards, Dean of the Sorrell College of Business. Dr. Stephen Taylor, Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences. Dr. Hal Fulmer, Associate Provost and Dean of First Year Studies. Dr. Mary Ann Templeton, the Dean of our Graduate School. And Mr. Ray White, who is the Vice Chancellor of our campus in Montgomery. Please join me in thanking these administrators for their great work. Thank you to the Alabama Institute for Deaf and Blind for providing our interpreters for today's program. We're delighted to have with us Beverly Bounds and Sydney Sykes, and I'm happy to report that Sydney is a graduate of our interpreter training program here at Troy, so welcome home to Sydney. I would also like to recognize and thank Mrs. Judy Robertson, the director of our interpreter training program, Mandy Hobbs, Rachel Arnold, and all of the behind-the-scenes people in the college and in the Chancellor's office that helped put this together. We appreciate you. The Helen Keller Lecture would not be possible without the vision and foresight of its #1 champion, our First Lady, Mrs. Janice Hawkins. Please help me thank Mrs. Hawkins for her leadership and dedication to this great work. Now it gives me great pleasure to introduce our Chancellor here at Troy University, Dr. Jack Hawkins, Jr. Dr. Hawkins will welcome our agency heads in just a moment and introduce our speaker for today. Chancellor Hawkins arrived in Troy after serving 10 years as president of the Alabama Institute for Deaf and Blind. During his decade at AIDB, the institution went from the brink of closure to becoming a national model for the education of students with sensory challenges. The same visionary leadership that transformed AIDB has transitioned Troy from a small regional university to a dynamic institution that is truly international in scope. During the Hawkins administration, Troy has expanded to reach into the Pacific region, attracted record numbers of international students to the Troy campus, made the move to NCAA Division I athletics, invested nearly $400 million in campus facilities, and launched 3 doctoral programs. Troy University and its academic programs are consistently ranked among the nation's best by such outfits as U.S. News and World Report and Princeton Review, among others. As you visit campus today, you will notice several construction projects underway, including a new health sciences building for our nursing and kinesiology programs, and a material sciences building that will facilitate research in the polymer sciences. Dr. Hawkins has served as chancellor at Troy since the fall of 1989 and is the longest-serving chief executive of a public 4-year university in the country. Please welcome our chancellor, Dr. Jack Hawkins, Jr.
Thank you so much, Dr. Palmer, and thanks to all of those that you mentioned for helping bring all of us together here on this very special occasion. Some of you, if not many of you, have heard me say more than once over the years that great universities truly stir great emotions, and typically that is generated through athletics, but I think emotions are also stirred by great causes, such as the one that we're here today to recognize and celebrate, and that is attention being called to low-incident disabilities, and that's exactly why this was created some 25 years ago. I want to thank my First Lady, Miss Janice Hawkins, for inspiring all of us to remember the low-incident populations, because it was truly her suggestion way back when to begin doing this, and it has served us well. I think it served us as a vehicle for collaboration between agencies, and it's my pleasure to recognize several of those representatives from the agencies that have come together over the years not only to celebrate this occasion, but also to develop new programs such as the Deaf Interpreter Training Program, Rehab Counseling Program, and others. And so we'll have discussions later in the day that may lead to yet more programs. I'm delighted to see the future teachers. Truly, our youth are our future. And for those of you who are dedicated to shaping minds and shaping character, we thank you for that. I'd ask you, if you will, to hold your applause. Quite a number of representatives, I think, warrant introduction, and I'd like to ask them to stand, and then we can recognize them as a group. The Alabama Institute for Deaf and Blind, and Dr. Palmer was right. Janice and I had the honor of serving that institution for a decade. It's really a special place, a special ministry, and those people who are here today do great work. Dr. John Massia, the president, and so proud of the work that Dr. Massia is doing. He truly is taking that institution to a new level, and I'm so grateful for that. Ms. Jessica Brummett, Ms. Jackie Cordell, Ms. Brody Jones, and we'd like to welcome, of course, Ms. Becky Watson, who was a member of our staff previously. And Becky, thank you so much for what you did, and thank you for what you're doing for AIDB. The Alabama Department of Rehab Services, and students, a great example of where you can go with a Troy degree. The Commissioner of Rehab, Jane Bertishaw. Jane, thank you. We're proud of you and proud to have you home, and I hope you've paid your alumni dues. Other members of the staff, Dana Barber, Badarius Bell, Ashley Townsend, and we welcome you. The Alabama Department of Mental Health, our good friend and a gentleman who's been part of this, I think, since day one, Mr. Steve Hammerdinger. Welcome back, Steve. A very, very special young lady that has been part of this great tradition now I know from the outset, and that's Miss Helen Keller, or Miss Keller Johnson, who represents the Helen Keller Foundation. And Keller was the great niece of Helen Keller, and actually it's Keller Johnson Thompson. When she started this journey, it was Keller Johnson, and then we added the Thompson years later, but we love her and we welcome her back. Also welcome Ms. Cynthia Thomas, who is the superintendent of schools here in Troy. I'd be remiss if I didn't recognize two gentlemen who is with us, who represents the Youth Leadership Development Program, a great program of youth leadership development, and our great friend, Dr. Kevin Walsh, and Kevin is really a special individual. We are brought together today to recognize and to celebrate the spirit of a great Alabamian, a lady, I think, who may have been the greatest of Alabamians, who has truly inspired the world, and that was Helen Keller. I can remember being in India just 3 years ago and being on the very site where Miss Keller had dedicated a building there to serve those who need rehab services. And she was just as alive in that faraway place as she is here in Alabama. You saw those who have spoken to this lecture series before, and I won't go through those, but they we've recognized them as some of the true greatest and most prominent people in service and representative of that population, but in service to that population. We have a rich history at this university, and we're very proud of it, of our service to the military. Today is a special day in the history of the United States Marine Corps because we celebrate 247 years of service, but tomorrow is Veterans Day. And then the day after that, we plan to beat Army on the Veterans Memorial Field when they come to Troy. And so this is a special time of year, and we thought it appropriate to have a speaker who would reflect those values of service. Truly, we know freedom is not free. It takes a sacrifice and hard work and the courage of so many to keep this country what it is today. We are very privileged. Dr. Palmer mentioned that we have programs in the South Pacific. Several of us just returned from 2 weeks in Vietnam. a place where 50 years ago we were doing battle, and today we're working together to educate the young people of that country. That's as it should be. But courage is required when you put on that uniform, and that is why at Troy University we stand for the flag and we kneel in prayer, and that's as it should be, because we recognize those people who have served. This gentleman today represents the best of the best, and I'm delighted to be able to introduce him to you. Our speaker, Staff Sergeant Luke Murphy of Florida. Shortly after 9/11, some of you will remember that tragic day, many people were inspired to serve because they recognized the threat that our country was under. Luke Murphy was one of those. He stepped forward at age 17 to enlist in the National Guard, and then he enlisted in the regular Army and was assigned to the 101st Airborne Division. He led a 5-man team in the 2003 invasion of Iraq, and they were successful in contributing to the liberation of 3 cities in that country. Sergeant Murphy returned to Iraq for a second deployment in 2005, and it was on that occasion that he was leading a 10-man recon team on April the 25th, 2006, and it was then that his life changed. In the aftermath, he went through 29 surgeries at Walter Reed Army Medical Center, and after retiring from service, Sergeant Murphy came home, received his bachelor's degree from Florida State University, and has worked in commercial real estate. But his real passion, and one that he has perfected, is speaking on behalf of America's wounded warriors. He co-wrote a memoir entitled Blasted by Adversity, The Making of a Wounded Warrior. He did that in order to give voice to a whole new generation of wounded warriors, people who have truly paid a high price so that all of us can enjoy the freedom we enjoy on a daily basis. We have a video that I think will characterize better than anything I can say what Luke Murphy has experienced, and I would ask that we show that, and then I would ask that Staff Sergeant Luke Murphy honor us by sharing his message.
The day I was injured was April 25th, 2006. We were operating in Solder City, Baghdad. I was in a Humvee in the front right seat, and my bumper had triggered an infrared laser that was attached to a roadside bomb, detonated in the side of my vehicle, removing my right leg instantly and blowing my left leg in half. I was laying there, drifting in and out of consciousness, and I felt this incredible sleep coming upon me. And I started seeing, like, my mom at my funeral crying, and I realized that I was not going to sleep, I was dying. I was in Baghdad ER for 24 hours receiving blood and fighting to stay alive. And then the following day, I was put on a military aircraft and sent to Landstuhl. They put an external fixator on my leg and to hold all the bones together, and I would walk with this huge cage on the left leg and a prosthetic on the right. And I remember the first time I stood up, I stood for about 15 seconds and about passed out, and that was my first day, and I realized it was going to be a long road.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Staff Sergeant Luke Murphy.
Thank you, Chancellor. Most of you may not know this, but him and I have something in common. We both received the Purple Heart in service, but he has a Bronze Star and I do not, and a doctorate. Folks, I don't usually start this way, but I'm just going to do it because there's a lot of students in the room. I absolutely hate public speaking. It makes me feel terrible inside. But when I get done, it's like being done with a run. You know, it's just, I feel so much better. And when I was in college, I was asked to give a short speech on somebody that inspires you. And I was certain the class would expect me to, you know, talk about a military person, but I didn't. I'd learned about Eric Weinmeier, who was actually spoken on this very stage. And I'd met the man that helped him get to the top of Everest. And he told me the story about first meeting Eric, and they were climbing in the evening, and he said, "Eric, we got to go down. It's getting dark." And Eric said, "Why?" And he said, "It's getting dark." He said, "Well, welcome to my world." And he turned on his night lamp, and they kept climbing. But, you know, the more I researched this guy, the more impressed I was. You know, his father was a Marine like mine. He had brothers like I do. And when he went blind at a young age, I often wondered, would it be worse to be born blind or to go blind? And I think it'd be worse to go blind, that's my opinion, because you would know what you'd lost. But they never left him behind, and they brought him everywhere they went. And, you know, some of the greatest athletes in the world have died on Everest, but not Eric. And, you know, if he was able to climb that mountain or the 7 highest mountains, I knew I would be able to beat my injury and climb my personal mountain. And I've never had the privilege of hearing him. And if there's anybody in the room that has heard him, I'll go ahead and apologize. But it's my goal today to be the second best speaker to ever come to Troy University, behind my hero, Eric Weinmeier. So I grew up in a rural setting with brothers. I can thank them for my competitive nature. I could never keep up with my big brother. He never let me win, and I have to thank them for that. When I was 17, like the chancellor said, I joined the military. I was not some adrenaline junkie. You know, I could never have been awarded a scholarship to play anything at Troy. I was kind of an average guy, but I learned through all this, you know, I was never going to be the LeBron James, or I was never going to be the best. I was never going to be the first like Helen Keller. But it's my goal to be the best version of myself and to be, you know, the Michael Jordan of love, of patriotism. And, you know, I'm here today for you and really not for me. I'm here to give a voice to those who lost it. And, you know, it's everyone's right and freedom to do whatever they want in this country, but I'll tell you, I have no animosity with the guys that blew me up, none. But it really hurts me to see people trash the country. Of course, like I said, it's their freedom and right to do it, but, you know, we're standing on the shoulders of giants, and we should do things to help and not hurt. When I got to Iraq, I quickly learned that war was not like what I expected. It was not what I had planned. It was not anything that we could have really trained for. We train so hard, folks, that we get broke in training, broken legs, broken hips. We have head injuries. People get paralyzed, blinded. It has to be hard, because when you get to war, it's freaking hard. We have to train for the unexpected, so we're surprised by nothing. And, you know, when I give these talks, I wonder which stories will I tell and how will I morph them. And, you know, every audience is different. I like to know who the audience is. Today, I chose a guy I think will be quite fitting. We were walking on a patrol mission in Baghdad early 2003. We had making several turns through the city. Next thing you know, we'd walked 7, 8 miles, 10 miles. We got 50 pounds of gear on. Our backs are hurting. You know, our boots have no insoles. It's just your feet and some thin layer of rubber, and all the weight kills you. 4, 5, 6-story buildings. The threat could come from anywhere. You got to have a head on a swivel. You could throw out a plan. Plan's not going to work. It's better to be reactive and just able to do. And I learned in combat that, you could be the smartest and the studliest, but sometimes those guys actually don't react the best when the bullets start flying. We had made a right turn walking on this patrol, 6, 7 guys on the right side of the road, 6, 7 on the left, a couple leaders in the middle, a medic. And an Iraqi man came up and said, hey, you guys aren't welcome here. Go ahead and turn back. And of course, that's not how it works. I mean, we're going this way, and that's just the way it is. Well, about a minute later, I didn't see her coming, but a little 5 or 6-year-old girl came up from behind us, and she was holding an explosive device. I imagine it was a grenade, and somebody must have pulled that pin and held it to her and closed her little hand and asked her to walk it up to us. So all of a sudden, I felt the loudest boom and blast I'd ever felt. I was temporarily knocked out, and then I woke up and I was still on my feet. I've been in major car accidents. I played football. I've been pounded by my brother and others, but nothing hit me like this before. I was covered in blood and pieces of my friends, and I knew I needed to get to the side of the road and get down and get cover, fire back, see who was hurt. And when I looked into the road, I saw half of our guys down. And we were so far from where we started at that forward operating base, I wondered how the heck are we going to get out of here? We can't carry them that far. We knew they wouldn't send a helicopter because of Black Hawk Down, so I knew we were in big trouble. And one of the guys that was laying in that street bleeding and screaming and thrashing, his name was Troy, and he was from Alabama. And in the original ground invading convoy, I had been knocked out of the back of the vehicle and left in an ambush. And I remember in basic training, they would sing these stupid songs like, "One day you'll be alone, all alone in a combat zone." And I'm like, I'm not going to be alone. This is not Vietnam or, Korea, World War II. And hell, here I am all alone. And there was nothing I could do. The enemy was way too far to do anything about, and they were just shooting it up. And rocks and dirt is stinging me in the face, and I'm on the ground. When I got knocked out, my weapon was pinned in the tailgate and did not come with me, so I had no weapon. Felt like an idiot. For years, I couldn't tell this story. A vehicle was coming through the blast and through the smoke, and there was another one on fire, and the guys were just letting us have it with machine guns. And it was more confusing than scary. But I jumped up in front of the vehicle, and they almost ran me over. So I was like, well, that didn't work. I'm a deep thinker. But the next vehicle was Troy, and he ordered his driver, pull over. He saw me. And I ran in the back of the Humvee. It was a box truck. It had all kinds of supplies for this invasion. And they had put, 150 knots into the back of this tarp. If you're not a Boy Scout, we have a saying, if you can't tie a knot, tie a lot. But I'm like trying to get this thing open, and Troy's like, get on the hood. So I jump on the hood of this Humvee, and I was in the 101st Airborne Division, which is really an air assault division. We come in by helicopters, sling-loaded. It's better. We can get in fast and get out. But somehow, I was on a Humvee that didn't have the hooks on the front for slinging. I'm like, how did I get on a Humvee without hooks? So I'm holding on to the windshield wipers, looking through the window at Troy, and they're just shooting it up. And, man, we got out of there and finally caught back up to our convoy. And I come running up, and my platoon or my squad leader says, "We got Murphy back." And the first sergeant said, "We lost Murphy?" I didn't even know they left me. But I was embarrassed, and I went up to Troy afterwards, and everybody knew Troy. Troy had served in the Marine Corps before the Army, and after 9/11, they didn't need their guys to come back. So the Army's like, "Oh yeah, we love Marines. Come on." And Troy was literally about 6'2", 230, and he could whip anybody in the company. The Marines do a lot of training when they're floating around on these boats, lots of jujitsu and stuff. A little different than when you're in the Army. But he once whipped like 25 guys in a row in Kuwait, preparing to go to this fight. And he was a guy everybody respected. So I asked him, hey, what can I do to repay you? and he said, "Get me a bottle of tequila when we get back." Well, now it's April, and we're in Baghdad, and Troy's on the ground, and I'm trying to figure out what in the hell we're going to do, and we're trying to stop the bleeding, and we get everybody out of there eventually, throwing them on trucks, just whatever we could do, and we get back, and we're cleaning up our stuff, and somebody walks up and sets a heavy machine gun down on the ground next to me and said, "Hey, you're a saw gunner now." And because one of our saw gunners was wounded and had to go home. And, I'd never carried that sucker except for a little bit here and there. And now, I'm going to have a 30-pound weapon on the front of me. I'm going to have to learn, how to run this belt-fed machine gun and control it. If bad guys are shooting in the crowd, I got to be able to get them and not innocents. And, it's unbelievable. And they throw down these pouches that are designed to carry hundreds and hundreds of belt-fed rounds. And, they still have blood on them and pieces of meat. And, it's just more than you could ever really understand. And then they called us all over and told us that Troy didn't make it. And that was tough. In fact, whenever I see the word Troy, it's a negative thought and a sad day. But he's one of the reasons I do this, because he can't do it anymore. And I think we should all be proud of him. So we went back home after a year of fighting, and I won't tell you the rest of all the stories. But I started training men to come back to Iraq, and I had like 40 days left on my 6-year contract, and the Army initiated stop loss. And they told me I was going to have to go back to Iraq, and I was like, hey, I'm not a wimp, but I've had my fill, and I'd like to go to college, and I've got a serious, I'm in a serious relationship with a girl in Florida State, and this isn't good for me. And they're like, "That's great. Go get your ID card changed, because your date doesn't say when you're getting out anymore. It says indefinite." And so I called my dad, the Marine, and he said, "Well, that's not right. You stood for your end of the deal, and a man's got to stand for something. You just come on home." I said, "Dad, if I come home, I'll be AWOL. I could never vote again. I couldn't buy a gun. If I get pulled over, I'm going back to Fort Campbell in handcuffs." And I thought about what my dad told me, and I went and saw, my team of 11 guys, and they were like, "Well, what are you going to do?" I was like, "Well, we're going back, boys." And, I toughed it out, and we redeployed. And when I got to Iraq, they sent all the squad leaders, staff sergeants, into combat first to learn from the unit that we would be replacing all the streets. So we had 2 days to learn a city the size of maybe Birmingham and Montgomery combined. Baghdad, 2 million people. And so, 2 days to learn a whole city, every route. That's about right. That's what they do in the military. And on our second day, riding with this other unit, we rode by a car, and the guy was very clean-shaven. And it's not normal there, but that's what they do when they're getting prepared to kill themselves. And all of a sudden, I felt the back end of my vehicle lift, and here's this boom again. And I see this torso fly over my vehicle and land in the road. And I'm like, "Oh my God, this is one of their guys." And luckily it wasn't. It was the bomber. But there was a little girl playing on the side of the road once again, and she was killed. And a couple of our guys were wounded. And somehow I knew right then I wasn't going to make that tour. It's like, I've got 363 more days. Holy hell. But you just can't operate scared. You can't be afraid. You got to somehow trick yourself. When you're preparing to go out on mission and you're hearing bombs going off, you say, "Oh, well, there's a couple less bombs out there now." It's just an interesting way to be able to overcome. Well, along comes April 24th when Troy died. And we were asked to go into Sadr City. And there's about 40,000 bad guys in Sadr City that listen to al-Sadr. And Sadr could actually trace his lineage all the way back to Muhammad, which is interesting because I don't know anybody that could say they were related to Jesus. But nonetheless, he's not really a great guy. And we would go into Sadr with 11 men, so 11 versus 40,000. And, fair odds. But they would shoot us up every time. And unfortunately, Solder City's in Baghdad. It's too close to the green zone. And when the generals in the green zone would hear about the fight going on, they would pull us back. Well, pulling back is the worst thing you could do because it gives your enemy confidence. But at the time, you know, the administration was under a lot of pressure from the press, and that pressure came down to us in combat. So really, we were out there with one hand behind our damn back. And that's just no way to send guys and girls into combat. If you're going to do it, let them do the job. But nonetheless, it was a long day in Solder. We spent 20-something hours in the city. We were working with the FBI and CIA and a few other weird organizations that day, and that doesn't happen as an infantryman usually. We were looking for a mass grave. They were building the case against Saddam Hussein. And everywhere we went, if you didn't like this village, boom, kill them all, put them in a hole. And we were looking for this grave, one, to build the case, and two, to give them a proper Muslim burial. They have to be pointed in a certain direction, and things have to be done. And we do that for them, even if they don't do it for themselves. We never found the grave, but all of a sudden I saw smoke billowing in the city, and I knew that meant, everybody who's bad, come in here, because here they are. And then the older people started sending little kids forward with bricks and rocks, and they're throwing them at us. And, we're providing security for the FBI, CIA, and these civilians on the ground. And, you literally see a brick coming, put your head down, bang, it banks off your helmet. It's like, geez, one guy I saw get hit in the nose, and it's blood, and, this is just normal. But you don't shoot at in these kind of situations. You're not authorized. And nobody wants to shoot a kid, obviously. But I knew that it was going to be a tough walk out of the city. I assumed we were going to get blown up. And we marched in at like 3 a.m., and now it's 9, 10 p.m., and this is how it really is. We'll go 24, 48 hours straight, sometimes without eating, obviously never sleeping, sometimes weeks without a shower. But I knew we were going to get it. So I was coming out of that city, and I was all kind of puckered up, waiting for this boom, and it didn't happen. And we made it back to the base. And an hour later, my lieutenant came up. He said, "Sergeant, we need to go back into the city and do the normal presence patrol." I said, "Sir, we've been in that city for 20-something hours. I think we had a good presence." Smart ass, yeah. And he said, "Well, yeah, get you guys, get in the trucks, and get them ready." So we get up and we get the trucks, and we got them running. We're doing a little checks on them, and all of a sudden my truck overheats. And it hadn't even left the base. And I was like, well, that's weird. And then we go out into the city, and the next truck is like spitting sparks into my lap, and we have to get towed back. So this is the second truck down. And then the lieutenant says, "We got to go finish the patrol." And now I'm like, "Sir, we've been there all day, we just went there again, and it was eerie and quiet, and I really got a bad feeling." He's like, "Get them loaded up." I said, "Finally, sir, would you sit down for a second?" And I told him the story about Troy. And I was the only guy in my unit that was there that day. A lot of people heard that story, but nobody was actually there. He had no idea. And he's like, he was empathetic, but, nice story, but get the guys ready. So they brought the company commander's truck up around so we could take it, and it had air conditioning. I was like, "Oh, this is great." We're used to having this stuff that doesn't work. Of course, your windows are up because of the bombs and because of shooting, and it's really like riding around in an oven. But we went back into the city, and we were coming out, and it's the day Troy died. And it's about midnight, so technically it's April 25th. As the chancellor said, but in my mind it was still the 24th. And my bumper crossed that infrared laser, and 4 shape charges tore through my vehicle, blew my right leg off immediately, blew my weapon in half, and it blew my left leg around where I was looking at the bottom of my boot. And I've been blown up a lot, so I was like, this is different, and this is not good. I'm a deep thinker, I know. But I felt a tremendous amount of pain and burning, and the Humvee was on fire, and I could hear the guys groaning in pain, and everybody's wounded. And they were rolling down the road 30 miles an hour I see the driver pumping the brakes. Nothing's happening. He can't stop. He's trying to get it out of gear. It won't come out of gear. And I'm yelling over to him, crash the truck, crash the truck. You know, we got to get out of here. We got 1,500 50 cal rounds. We got 9 grenades in this vehicle. We're going to bleed out if we don't get stopped. And he can't hear me. And I took a deep breath after the bomb had blown all my air out of my lungs. And it was the nastiest smoke I'd ever inhaled. And I literally felt like somebody poured gas down my throat and lit it. So I'm losing the ability to talk to my driver, and I see him open his door to try to get fresh air, and his rifle bounces out of the truck. And I mean, you can't lose a rifle in the military. You can't lose night vision. You can't lose a radio. You can't lose anything, but not a rifle. So now I'm worried about getting in trouble when I should be worried about staying alive. And then I realize he's going to jump for it. He's going to save himself. And it isn't like the movies where you can grab the steering wheel. You see that crap. These things are wide. It's farther than from me to her. And so there's nothing I could do. There's nowhere I can go. I've got this Blue Force tracker computer here next to me, pinning me into the seat so I can tell where the enemy and where the friendlies are. The fire's going up through the turret, and it got so hot, it ignited my gunner's chin strap. That burned before skin. And he had this permanent, just nasty burn here. His leg was compound fractured. Back left seat was Sergeant Roberts. His leg was compound fractured. And I see the driver shut the door and decide to stay in the fire with us. And you can't train that, folks. That's just love. And it's like, thank God. And then he crashes the vehicle into the wall of Solder City, which is 10 feet high and 3 feet thick. And we go halfway through the wall and stop. Now, there's nobody in the back right seat because it sits on top of a fuel tank. And our vehicle doors are locked. And unfortunately, we learned the hard way, if you put somebody there and there's a fire, like there was in our case, they're going to burn to death. Then you're going to watch it through that window as you're trying to rip the door open. It won't come open. The doors are 400 pounds of solid steel. So everybody gets out of the truck. They fall onto the ground. My gunner jumps onto a compound fractured leg and, falls. And then I realized I'm the only one in, and I'm like, okay, it's time to get out. I wasn't going to get out without them. I couldn't help them, so I was at least going to go down with the damn ship. And I go to open the door, and it's buckled in from the blast. It's V'd, and it won't open. And so I start elbowing that sucker, elbow against steel. And every time I hit it, my arm is, bleeding and erupting. And eventually I was able to knock that door off its hinges and knock that portion of the wall over. And I think I had a little help. Whether you believe or not, I can tell you I do. And I rolled out onto the ground, and it felt so much better outside than it did in that burning damn Humvee. And I felt like I crawled 100 yards, but I went about 5 feet. I rolled over onto my back, and then I realized my tourniquets were on my back. And so I tried to roll again, and I was done. I didn't have any blood. I had no power. And I never wanted to be a hero, and I'm not a hero, but I just didn't think I'd ever be in a position not be able to help myself and have to rely on everybody else. It's just such a terrible feeling. And as you saw in the video, I literally started drifting off, and I saw my mom crying at my funeral, and I said, I'm not going to do that to her. And I fought like hell to stay awake. And I was the only guy on the wrong side of the wall. Everybody else was in the street. So when we get blown up, we always do something different. That way the enemy doesn't put a secondary bomb out and get the next, guys responding. So every time we leave the base, we come up with a plan, every time. And every time we come back, we go over the plan. How did it work? After action review. What could we do better? And that day we decided if we got hit, we would blow through the ambush. Well, I wasn't blowing through any damn ambush. I'm laying on the ground, and I'm going, the one time we decided to do that, I'm left once again alone in combat. And so I'm trying to stay calm because I remember how Troy struggled. And I thought, man, if I stay calm, I won't bleed out. And I also didn't want to be discovered by the bad guys and drug away. They used to like to cut our heads off and send the videos home to our families. So I've got half of the gun with me, and it just won't shoot anymore. It's just a pistol grip, and I'm waiting for help. And finally, my driver comes to me. The 50 cal on the vehicle was shooting, boom, 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 and that's not how they shoot. They usually shoot, but it was cooking off from the fire. And so he had to go in front of that 50 cal and time the rounds and run in front of it to get to me. And when he got to me, he saw I was charred, black, my femur was hanging out. I saw him like, almost throw up. And he's like, I'm going to go get the medic. And it's not what we're supposed to do, but I got it. The situation was a little much. The medic comes running around, and he was a kid named, I'll just leave his name out, but he was born an American, but of Mexican descent, and he was not a citizen. And this is his third deployment. Someone like that has done more than most Americans and just didn't have the luxury of being born a citizen. But Doc comes up and he says, "How you doing, Murph?" And I'm like, "I'm fine." Macho infantry guy. He's like, "You need morphine?" And I remember morphine can lower your heart. It can kill you just to make you comfortable. And I said, "Nah, I'm good." He said, "Good, I wasn't going to give you any anyway." So we are joking. And, they put the tourniquets on me. They run me back to the forward operating base. They put me on a helicopter. And my first sergeant is from Louisiana. He said, "Sergeant Murphy, I'm putting your wallet under your head." And I'm laying there, and I'm like, "All right." And I hear Jefferson, one of my guys, whimpering. And I'm like, "What's wrong, Jefferson?" And in his raspy voice. And he said, "It hurts, Sergeant." And I told him to quit being up. And I won't say the word. And so he starts laughing, and Roberts is laughing. And First Sergeant says, the whole company's out here crying, and you guys are in here joking and smoking. And about that time, the bird took off, and we left. We get to Baghdad emergency room, and they put us on the back of a John Deere Gator, this bouncy thing, and oh my God, my bones are all moving, and so painful. And they bring us into this big tent, and I'm like, a tent? I want walls, man. I'm feeling a little vulnerable right now. And my one guy, Roberts, says, "Can I go to sleep?" We hadn't been to sleep in days. And they said, "Yeah, you can go to sleep, but you can't." And he pointed at me, and you got to stay awake. They're not going to tell you you're going to die, but they're telling you if you go to sleep, you might die. Then they asked me if there's anybody I want to call. And I was like, "I don't want to call anybody." And they're like, "Sure." I was like, "Yeah, I don't want to call anybody." And they're like, "Son, you may not make it. You don't want to call anybody?" I was like, "All right." So I called my mom, told her I'd been in a fire, and that's why my voice was so bad. But I said, "I got a scratch on my leg." Not true. And I didn't want her to worry, and I was embarrassed. And then they called my girlfriend. I told her the same story. And she hangs up the phone, starts crying, and all her friends are like, back at Florida State, they're like, "What'd he say?" He said he had a scratch on his leg. I'm like, "Well, that doesn't sound bad." She says, "Well, you don't know him." She knew I'd lost my leg. So I tricked Mama, but I didn't trick her. And I went to Walter Reed. And before I got there, I was in Landstuhl, Germany. And the surgeon asked me to sign a form so they cut off my other leg. Because I was missing 9 inches of calf. And both my tib and fib had been compound fractured. And the doctor said, "I don't think we could save this leg. And you'll be so much better off if you do this, because prosthetics are wonderful. You'll be up and walking." He leaves the room, and a nurse walks in and said, "Don't sign that. Don't sign that." He doesn't know that. You never know. You may be able to keep it. You can always have it cut off later. It's called limb salvage. And so the doctor comes back in. He's a colonel, and I'm a staff sergeant. You do what the hell you're told in the infantry. And he says, "You didn't sign the form." I said, "Well, I think I want to try limb salvage." He goes out there, and I could hear him chew that nurse's butt. Oh, my God. But because of her, to this day, I still have my leg. And I'm very thankful for that. I went to Walter Reed. I was around all these guys and girls. A couple girls lost their legs, and guys lost their legs. Guys been shot, blinded, burned, paralyzed. And there was no pecking order or hierarchy like there is in the military. But I quickly realized if somebody had been there longer than you, or if they were wounded worse than you, you just kind of give them that respect. So I'm going down the sidewalk, and I'm in the wheelchair, and I got one leg out, and it's in a cage, and I see this younger private coming my way. It's double amputee. So I get off the sidewalk, Whereas just a few months ago, I might have told that guy to go do some push-ups or something. And he doesn't even say hi, and it was interesting. Military always wants to assign some sort of rank, and the rank was just have respect and be empathetic, and it was like an unwritten code. I had 29 surgeries there. I've had 41 since total. I got a bad infection from the blast, and we've just never been able to kill it. So the other surgeries have been slowly cutting off more and more of my leg. When I first got asked to do this, I thought, being blind to me would be the worst, or deaf, and I don't know if I could do that. But it isn't really about a pecking order now. It's about the power of telling your story. If you're willing to tell your story without notes, without a teleprompter, you come across candid from the heart. And I recommend if you ever get an opportunity to do this, you do it that way. But there's just nothing more powerful than your story. And while I'll never be first like Eric Weinmeier or Helen Keller, I've also never been last. And I'm never going to quit, and I'm never going to give up. And folks, if I could leave you with anything, just like I saw in that short video, one of the best measures of character, whether you're blasted by adversity, whether you're blessed with prosperity, we all get knocked down. It could be a tough class. It could be a bad accident. It could be a bad breakup. It could be cancer. It could be anything. But Helen was right. One of the true measures of character is what you do when you're knocked down. It's how you get back up. It's how you respond. People ask me all the time, how long did it take you to get over this? I'm not over this. I have to fight this every day. And I wake up happy, and it's a personal choice, and I'm going to go forward. I'm going to live for my buddy Troy. I'm going to tell his story and other stories. And I'm going to be, a leader by example. And while I know I'm not the best speaker or, the best at anything, I'm going to try my damn best every day. And I hope every one of you will do the same. As you go forward in life, just remember there's lots of ways to serve. When I was at the hospital, I thought the physical therapists were killing me. I couldn't trust them. I'm like, I don't know if I can do this. It hurts bad. I feel like my staples are going to blow out. But I had to trust them, and I had to push through the pain. And I realized they gave me my life back. So if there's people in this room that are going to help folks in the future with disabilities, you can help them get their life back. You can help them have a life worth living. You can learn from them and help others. And so I've been asked quite a few times, like, well, what's your message going to be today? I don't know. It's going to be whatever y'all take from it. I remember when I wrote my book, a guy came up and wanted me to sign it. And he said, you helped me so much through my daughter's suicide. There's nothing in that book that will help with your child's suicide. Nothing. But once again, you never know what somebody's going to take away from a message. And yeah, it's a little bit vulnerable to get up here and tell a story that's painful and that hurts. It continues to hurt me to this day. But I'm glad I could do it. And I'm glad I've got whatever muscles I've got left. And as long as there's air in these lungs, I'm going to do my best. And, I left 2 kids and my wife in the middle of a hurricane to come here and be with you. And it's my duty when I get home to raise them right. I think you only got one chance to raise a kid right in this country. And I hope if some of you become parents one day, you'll take that very serious and guide them in the right direction. And once again, I just want to thank you all for this time, this platform. Not every university is wise to have people like this come in and shake it up a little bit. But it's been my honor. I hope you take away something great from it. And once again, thank you, Troy. Thank you, Chancellor. And I appreciate everyone in this room for everything you've done, everything you're going to do. God bless everybody. Thank you.
I don't know about you, but I come away from this inspired and maybe a bit convicted about the things that I complain about from time to time. Luke, thank you for your inspiring message today, but more than that, thank you for your service to this great nation of ours. We appreciate you and everything that you stand for. I want to thank everyone for your attendance today. I hope you found this lecture to be as inspirational to you as it has been to me. In just a moment, I'm going to ask that our agency heads that are here, our guests today that will be having lunch with us in just a moment, if you would please come down front at the conclusion of this program. We have some photographs that we would like to take, and then we will transition over to our dining facility for our luncheon. And to the rest of you, again, thank you for your attendance. To our high school students, welcome to Troy. You're always welcome on this campus. And I wish all of you a wonderful Veterans Day holiday. Thank you. This concludes our program.